Reports say Vanessa Trump was fed up with the hectic lifestyle of being the president's daughter-in-law.
Vanessa Trump just finally broke her silence on Donald Trump, and the moment carried a weight that few could ignore. For years, she had remained largely outside the whirlwind of public commentary surrounding the former president. She was not one to leap into interviews, statements, or the endless cycles of commentary that often follow anyone tied to Trump. That silence created an aura of intrigue around her, an unanswered question about where she stood and how she perceived the man whose name she still carried from her years of marriage to Donald Trump Jr. The moment she chose to speak transformed her from a quiet bystander into a figure whose perspective could shift narratives and stir up both curiosity and speculation. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The significance of Vanessa Trump breaking her silence is rooted in the unique vantage point she occupies. Unlike many political operatives or media commentators, her relationship with the Trump family was deeply personal. She spent years inside the Trump inner circle, attending family gatherings, navigating the intricacies of a household constantly under media glare, and observing firsthand the ways Donald Trump handled both personal and public matters. For a long time, she kept that perspective to herself, never joining the chorus of voices, supporters, or critics who dissected his every move. Her decision to finally speak suggests not only a change in her own willingness to be heard, but also an understanding that her words would carry special credibility. After all, hers is not an outsider's view, but that of someone who shared a home, a family dynamic, and a history connected directly to the man at the center of so much controversy. There is also something fascinating about the timing. Silence broken after years is rarely accidental. It invites questions about what compelled her to step into the public conversation now. Was it a sense of responsibility, knowing that remaining quiet no longer served her or the public? Was it the accumulation of years of watching narratives being shaped without her voice? Or was it a recognition that her perspective could help illuminate aspects of Donald Trump's character that few others could describe with the same degree of authenticity? Whatever the reason, the timing made the moment feel deliberate, and that deliberate nature only added to its impact. It was not a spontaneous outburst, but rather a measured entrance into a dialogue that has already stretched far beyond one man and into the fabric of American life. Vanessa Trump's words, even without being repeated verbatim, reverberated because they were attached to her identity. The Trump name is more than a political brand. It has become a symbol, one that sparks polarized reactions. For supporters, it embodies strength, wealth, and defiance of the establishment. For detractors, it is shorthand for division, controversy, and relentless spectacle. When Vanessa Trump finally added her voice to that symbolic weight, she shifted the balance ever so slightly. Whether she leaned toward support or criticism mattered less than the fact that she no longer remained in the shadows. Her decision alone was enough to make headlines and to be dissected by media analysts, political strategists, and ordinary observers who understood that her silence had once been a statement in itself. The implications of her speaking are far-reaching. One immediate effect is the way it humanizes the Trump story. Much of the conversation around Donald Trump has been dominated by policy, politics, and public behavior, but Vanessa's perspective, rooted in lived experience, brings it down to the level of personal relationships, family dynamics, and private character traits. These are the dimensions often missing from political discourse, yet are perhaps the most revealing. When someone who has been so close decides to speak, listeners inevitably lean in more attentively. It is not just about politics anymore, it becomes about the man behind the politics, the father, the grandfather, the person whose life is intertwined with those around him. Her silence breaking also creates ripples within the Trump family dynamic itself. The family has long projected an image of unity, even in times of turmoil. By stepping forward, Vanessa challenges that image, not necessarily by contradicting it, but by showing that voices within or adjacent to the family are not monolithic. Each individual has their own perspective, and those perspectives, when shared, complicate the picture painted by years of carefully curated public appearances. Her voice is not simply one among many. It is one that cannot be easily dismissed. That reality places her at the crossroads of personal loyalty and public truth-telling, a position that is both powerful and precarious. For the public, her words ignite curiosity about what has been unsaid until now. People naturally wonder what details she witnessed during her time in the Trump orbit. What moments stood out to her? What qualities in Donald Trump left lasting impressions, whether positive or negative? While she did not set out to provide a tell-all, the very act of speaking plants seeds of speculation and opens space for ongoing discussion. The intrigue grows not because she revealed every detail, but because she finally chose not to remain silent. Silence, after all, had shielded her from scrutiny, but breaking it exposes her to both interest and interpretation. On a cultural level, Vanessa Trump's decision is emblematic of a broader phenomenon in American public life. When figures associated with high-profile individuals choose to step into the light, they often serve as mirrors reflecting back the complexities of power, influence, and family. Her voice adds nuance to a story that has often been simplified into political soundbites. It reminds audiences that the Trump saga is not just about one man's political career, but also about the web of relationships that surround him. By breaking her silence, she reminds the public that personal stories matter, that behind the spectacle lies a network of people whose lives have been deeply shaped by proximity to power. The emotional weight of the moment cannot be overlooked either. Vanessa Trump's silence had been a shield not only against the press, but perhaps also against the emotional strain of constantly being linked to one of the most polarizing figures in modern history. To step forward now is to accept that strain and to choose engagement over distance. It is a move that requires courage because it opens the door to both criticism and support, both of which can be equally overwhelming when they come in waves. But it also signals a readiness to claim her own narrative rather than allowing it to be written for her by others. In that sense, the act of breaking silence is not just about Donald Trump. It is also about Vanessa Trump herself asserting agency over her place in the larger story. The broader implications extend into the political sphere as well. Donald Trump remains a figure who commands intense loyalty and opposition in equal measure. When someone like Vanessa Trump speaks, her words inevitably become fodder for political narratives. Supporters may seize upon them as validation, while critics may use them as evidence against him. Yet in the midst of that tug-of-war, her voice maintains a distinct authenticity that cannot be manufactured. The political system thrives on commentary, but her perspective cuts through, because it originates from lived proximity rather than strategic positioning. That quality makes her entrance into the conversation uniquely impactful. Even beyond politics, Vanessa Trump's decision resonates on a societal level. It underscores the idea that silence is powerful but temporary. People often stay quiet for years, guarding their perspectives and protecting their boundaries. Yet there comes a moment when remaining silent no longer serves their truth. Vanessa's moment is an example of that shift, a reminder that voices withheld can eventually emerge with even greater force. Society often underestimates the power of timing, but her timing demonstrates that the weight of words grows when they are delayed and finally released. The media's reaction, of course, plays its own role in amplifying the significance. Journalists and commentators immediately latched onto the story, not because it was unexpected, but because it filled a long-standing gap. Her silence had been a mystery, and mysteries always invite fascination. The coverage became less about the content of her words, and more about the fact that she chose to speak at all. That framing only deepens the intrigue and ensures that her voice will continue to reverberate even as discussions shift and evolve. Once silence is broken, it cannot be restored, and the echoes of that moment live on in headlines, discussions, and cultural memory. Vanessa Trump's decision to finally add her voice to the ever-unfolding story of Donald Trump opens new corridors of reflection that extend far beyond the immediate act of speaking. Once the barrier of silence is lifted, the space that follows fills with analysis, speculation, and interpretation. What makes her choice remarkable is not only the fact that she spoke, but also the way her voice reframes the ongoing narrative around the Trump family and their broader role in public life. To fully appreciate the depth of this moment, one must consider its implications across multiple layers: personal history, public perception, generational influence, and the symbolic resonance of her stepping forward after years of silence. The Trump family has often been seen as a fortress, guarded tightly against external intrusion. Their public image has been carefully managed over decades, shaped by Donald Trump's business empire, reality television presence, and later his political career. To break silence within such a context is akin to opening a window in a room that has long been sealed shut. Fresh air rushes in, and suddenly, what was once assumed to be a monolith begins to appear more textured, more human, more vulnerable. Vanessa Trump's voice does not demolish the fortress, but it introduces cracks that allow outsiders to glimpse something beyond the facade. That act alone reshapes the perception of the family, reminding observers that the people within are not simply characters in a political saga, but individuals with their own journeys, reflections, and truths. Her unique vantage point carries a quality of credibility that cannot be replicated. Vanessa spent years navigating the world of the Trump family from an insider's perspective, albeit not as a political figure, but as someone bound through marriage and family ties. This position gave her a front-row seat to interactions, decisions, and private dynamics that remain invisible to the public eye. By finally breaking her silence, she elevates her experiences into the public domain, transforming personal observations into material that resonates with a wider audience. The value of her perspective lies not in dramatic revelations, but in the authenticity of having lived through the reality of being a Trump family member. This authenticity makes her words compelling even without sensational detail because they carry the authority of lived truth. The implications for Donald Trump himself are multifaceted. On one hand, Vanessa Trump's voice adds depth to the understanding of his persona, providing insights that go beyond political rhetoric or media caricatures. On the other, her decision to step forward disrupts the tightly controlled narrative he has often projected. Donald Trump has built much of his influence on the power of image, an image he has defended with vigor and crafted with precision. When someone close to that image decides to speak independently, it introduces an element of unpredictability. It shows that the story of Trump is not solely authored by Donald himself, but also by those who have intersected with his life in meaningful ways. This redistribution of narrative power is subtle but significant, reminding the world that influence is not absolute, and that even those closest to towering figures can shape how history remembers them. The generational aspect of Vanessa Trump's silence breaking also deserves attention. The Trump family legacy now spans multiple generations, with children and grandchildren carrying the name into different contexts. For younger generations, the silence of figures like Vanessa had symbolized a protective shield, one that allowed them to grow without direct exposure to the media frenzy surrounding their grandfather. By speaking now, Vanessa Trump reshapes that legacy, not only for herself, but also for her children. She sets an example that silence, while useful for self-preservation, does not have to be permanent. In doing so, she subtly empowers her children and others in similar positions, showing that personal agency remains possible even under the weight of a globally recognized name. Her act of speaking also challenges the broader societal assumption that silence equals neutrality. For years, Vanessa Trump's lack of public commentary was interpreted in various ways, as a choice to remain above the fray, as an act of loyalty, or simply as indifference. Each of these interpretations reflected more about the public's projection than about her own reality. By finally breaking her silence, she dismantles those assumptions and asserts that silence was not neutrality. It was strategy, timing, and self-determination. This shift underscores the importance of recognizing that silence is not absence, but presence in another form. When that silence is broken, the release of words becomes more than communication. It becomes a declaration of autonomy. In the realm of media culture, Vanessa Trump's move represents a striking case of narrative disruption. The media thrives on predictability, often cycling through familiar voices and perspectives when discussing the Trump family. Her entrance into this conversation interrupts that cycle, injecting fresh material into a discourse that many had thought was already saturated. This disruption is powerful because it revitalizes attention, compelling the media to reframe questions and reconsider assumptions. The very act of speaking introduces novelty, and novelty drives engagement. Thus, Vanessa Trump not only participates in the narrative but also reshapes its trajectory, ensuring that her role cannot be easily relegated to the margins. One cannot ignore the psychological dimension of her decision. To remain silent for years while connected to a figure who dominates headlines daily requires discipline and perhaps a degree of internal conflict. Silence can shield, but it can also weigh heavily, carrying the burden of unexpressed thoughts and untold experiences. To finally speak is to unburden, to release what has been carried privately into the light of public recognition. That release can be both liberating and daunting. For once spoken, words take on a life of their own. They are interpreted, reinterpreted, and often amplified beyond the speaker's control. Vanessa Trump's choice to embrace that risk reflects a profound act of courage, a willingness to trade the safety of invisibility for the vulnerability of honesty. The cultural resonance of her voice is amplified by the Trump phenomenon itself. Donald Trump is not just a political figure, he is a cultural icon whose name evokes reactions across the globe. Anyone connected to him, willingly or unwillingly, becomes part of that cultural story. Vanessa Trump, by speaking, reclaims her place within that story rather than being defined solely by her silence. In a way, she turns the cultural spotlight into an opportunity to assert her individuality, reminding the public that her identity is not confined to her last name or her marital history. She becomes a participant rather than a footnote, carving out a space for herself in a narrative that often reduces individuals to supporting roles in the Trump drama. From a historical perspective, moments like these matter because they enrich the record of an era. Historians rely not only on policies and events, but also on the voices of those who lived through them. Vanessa Trump's perspective, shared at this juncture, becomes part of that record, offering future generations a more nuanced understanding of the Trump family dynamic and its intersection with American political and cultural life. Even if her words do not dominate headlines for long, they remain embedded in the archive of this moment in history, ready to be revisited when scholars and citizens alike seek to understand the complexities of the Trump legacy. The implications also stretch into the realm of gender and societal expectations. Women connected to powerful men are often expected to remain silent or supportive, their voices relegated to the background of public discourse. Vanessa Trump's decision challenges that expectation, showing that women connected to influential figures can choose their own moments to step forward. Her act is not simply about Donald Trump, it is also about the broader issue of women asserting agency in spaces where their silence is often presumed. In that sense, her silence breaking becomes symbolic of a larger cultural shift, one in which women are increasingly refusing to be defined by the men in their lives. The reaction of the public further underscores the significance of her words. For many, Vanessa Trump had been a name in the background, known but not fully understood. When she finally spoke, she became a figure of intrigue in her own right. Audiences lean into voices like hers because they offer a sense of authenticity missing from the rehearsed rhetoric of politics. The curiosity is not voyeuristic but human. It stems from a desire to understand how individuals navigate life under the weight of fame, family, and politics combined. Vanessa's perspective offers a window into that navigation, and the public's interest affirms the value of her voice. The ripple effects of her choice will likely continue for years, shaping not only perceptions of Donald Trump, but also of the Trump family as a whole. Each voice that emerges from within or near the family adds a new layer of complexity, ensuring that the story cannot be reduced to a single narrative. Vanessa Trump's contribution to that mosaic is now indelible, and it will influence how future discussions unfold. She has, in effect, expanded the chorus of voices shaping the Trump legacy, and that expansion cannot be undone. Her decision also highlights the interplay between personal identity and public narrative. For years, Vanessa Trump was defined publicly by her marriage and her connection to Donald Trump Jr. By breaking her silence, she reclaims her narrative, shifting from being defined by association to being recognized as an individual with her own perspective. This transition is crucial, for it demonstrates the possibility of self-definition even within the constraints of a high-profile family. It reminds the world that personal agency remains possible, even when public perception threatens to overshadow individuality. In reflecting on Vanessa Trump's choice, one also recognizes the enduring power of timing. Words spoken too soon may be dismissed as reactive, while words spoken too late risk being irrelevant. Vanessa's decision to speak now, after years of silence, demonstrates an acute awareness of timing's role in shaping impact. Her words arrived not in the midst of chaos, but at a moment when their absence had become conspicuous. This careful timing magnified their weight, ensuring that when she finally spoke, the world was ready to listen. Timing in this case was not accidental, but instrumental in transforming her words into a moment of cultural significance. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of Vanessa Trump breaking her silence is the way it reframes silence itself. For years, silence had been her shield, her strategy, her choice. Now, by speaking, she redefines that silence not as passivity, but as preparation. Her silence was not a void, but a stage being set for a carefully chosen moment. When that moment arrived, the contrast between years of quiet and the sudden emergence of words made the act all the more powerful. Silence, in retrospect, becomes part of the story rather than an absence from it, and her decision to break it becomes the climax of a narrative years in the making. In sum, Vanessa Trump's voice has transformed the landscape of the Trump story, infusing it with new layers of complexity, authenticity, and humanity. Her choice reverberates across personal, familial, cultural, and historical dimensions, ensuring that her perspective will remain a touchstone in the ongoing discourse about Donald Trump and those connected to him. By breaking her silence, she has not only altered perceptions, but also asserted her own place in the narrative, demonstrating the enduring power of words spoken at the right time, from the right vantage point, by the right person. When Vanessa Trump finally decided to make her voice heard regarding Donald Trump, the reverberations of that decision stretched beyond the immediate political and personal spheres. It marked a moment where silence transformed into agency, where a figure once thought peripheral to the saga stepped into the foreground. To build further on the significance of that choice, it is worth exploring the deeper symbolic layers, the cultural context, and the nuanced consequences that radiate outward when someone so closely tied to a polarizing figure decides to speak. Her decision underscores the way silence and speech are entwined in public life. Silence can serve as a sanctuary, insulating someone from the turbulence of constant scrutiny. Yet silence is also porous. Others often fill it with assumptions and projections. For years, Vanessa Trump was a figure interpreted through her absence, with her silence molded into meanings that were not necessarily her own. By finally speaking, she seized back control of that narrative, and in doing so, reminded observers that the act of breaking silence is as much about reclaiming identity as it is about sharing information. This reclaiming of identity is crucial in a world where personal stories are often overshadowed by larger-than-life public figures. Vanessa's choice also highlights the paradox of intimacy and distance in relation to power. She lived within the orbit of the Trump family, experienced its inner workings, and yet, for the longest time, stood at a deliberate distance from public debate. That distance gave her perspective its distinct character. Unlike politicians or commentators whose voices are sharpened by ideological battles, her words carried the weight of someone who observed not from a podium, but from a dinner table, a family event, and a household touched daily by the presence of Donald Trump. This blend of intimacy and distance gives her commentary a layered complexity. She is neither wholly inside nor entirely outside the Trump phenomenon, which positions her uniquely to shift perceptions. Her act of speaking also demonstrates the enduring tension between private truths and public narratives. Private truths often remain unseen, lived in the quiet spaces of family dynamics and personal interactions. Public narratives, by contrast, are shaped by media cycles, sound bites, and political battles. Vanessa Trump bridged these two realms by allowing a sliver of private truth to enter the public narrative. In doing so, she revealed how fragile and fluid the boundary between private and public really is. Once crossed, it changes the way audiences perceive the figure at the center of the story, not only as a public leader, but also as a person whose life touches others in complex ways. One striking dimension of her decision is the way it challenges the myth of the impermeable family image. The Trump family has long cultivated a sense of impenetrability, projecting solidarity even during crises. Vanessa's silence-breaking punctures that myth, not necessarily by attacking it, but by showing that individuals connected to the family can assert their own voices outside of the collective brand. It humanizes the family dynamic, making it more relatable to the public who understand that even within seemingly unified households, individual perspectives exist. This nuance destabilizes the idea of the family as a single unified entity and instead reframes it as a constellation of voices, each capable of shaping the larger story. Her timing also demonstrates how silence breaking functions as a kind of punctuation in history. For years, the Trump narrative rolled forward relentlessly, filled with controversies, headlines, and dramatic turns. Vanessa's voice entered not during the height of chaos, but at a moment when the absence of her voice had itself become notable. Inserting her perspective at this juncture had the effect of reshaping the rhythm of the broader narrative. It was as though a pause had been broken, and the tempo of the story shifted. Timing, therefore, became a tool of influence, magnifying her impact far beyond what the same words might have achieved had they been spoken earlier. The cultural implications extend into the domain of celebrity, where silence and speech carry amplified consequences. The Trump family occupies a space that straddles politics and celebrity culture. In celebrity culture, silence is often perceived as deliberate, an act of withholding that heightens public curiosity. When that silence breaks, it creates a spectacle of revelation. Vanessa Trump's decision plays directly into this dynamic, where her words become not just content, but an event in themselves. The act of speaking was newsworthy before the substance was even considered, underscoring the power of spectacle in modern culture. There is also a broader societal resonance in her decision, one that speaks to the universal tension between personal autonomy and collective identity. Individuals tied to powerful families often struggle to carve out their own space, their identity subsumed under the weight of the collective name. Vanessa's act of breaking silence is a refusal to be swallowed by that collective identity. It represents an assertion of autonomy, a declaration that she exists not only as a supporting character but as an independent voice. This resonates widely because it mirrors the struggles many people face in asserting individuality within families, workplaces, or communities that overshadow their personal identities. Psychologically, her decision can be seen as an act of liberation. Years of silence may have offered protection, but they also came with the weight of suppression. To finally speak is to unburden, to allow thoughts and perspectives long kept private to find release. This liberation is not just personal, it becomes symbolic. It communicates to others living in the shadow of larger-than-life figures that silence does not have to be permanent, and that choosing to break it can be empowering. It offers a template for reclaiming agency, even in contexts where agency seems limited. The implications for public discourse are profound. Vanessa Trump's entrance into the conversation expands the chorus of voices shaping the Trump legacy. For years, commentary has come largely from political allies, opponents, and analysts. Her voice introduces a different texture, one rooted in personal experience and unaligned with political calculation. This diversification of voices enriches public discourse, making it harder for any single narrative to dominate uncontested. In this way, her silence breaking contributes to a more pluralistic and nuanced conversation about Donald Trump and his role in American life. It also underscores the enduring influence of proximity. In political and cultural storytelling, the weight of a voice is often proportional to its proximity to the subject. Vanessa Trump's proximity gives her perspective and authority that cannot be replicated by outsiders, no matter how informed. This authority makes her words impactful even in the absence of detailed revelations. Simply put, her proximity validates her perspective, and that validation ensures that her voice will echo longer and louder than many others. Beyond the immediate political and cultural context, her decision offers insight into the shifting dynamics of legacy. Donald Trump's legacy is not solely his own to shape, it is influenced by the voices of those connected to him. By speaking, Vanessa Trump enters that process of legacy formation, contributing her perspective to the mosaic of narratives that will define how future generations understand this era. Her contribution, though distinct from others, becomes part of the historical record, ensuring that the story of Donald Trump is not one-dimensional, but layered with perspectives from those who knew him personally. Her silence breaking also touches on the concept of narrative inheritance. Children and grandchildren of high-profile figures often inherit not only the family name but also the narratives attached to it. By speaking, Vanessa influences what her own children will inherit, reframing the narrative they will carry forward. This act of narrative inheritance is powerful, for it determines not only how the present is understood, but also how the future is remembered. In this sense, her voice is not just about the past or present, it is about shaping the legacy that her children and future generations will live with. From a symbolic standpoint, Vanessa Trump's act can be viewed as a microcosm of the tension between power and truth. Power often seeks to control narratives, to maintain silence when voices could complicate the image being projected. Truth, on the other hand, resists containment, emerging when silence can no longer hold it. Her decision to speak embodies this tension, showing how truth eventually asserts itself even in the face of power's preference for control. It becomes a reminder that no narrative, no matter how tightly managed, can remain untouched by the voices of those who lived it. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us. What are your thoughts on Vanessa Trump finally speaking about Donald Trump? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.